An Associated Press review finds that investigations and criminal cases are revealing some truth in a set of controversial memos accusing the Trump campaign of working with the Russian government. But libel complaints argue otherwise, and whether there was collusion remains an open question. No one has painted a more vivid or lurid portrait of a purported alliance between Donald Trump's presidential campaign and Russia than a quiet, nondescript former British spy named Christopher Steele. Steele's once confidential campaign memos were published just before Trump's inauguration, unleashing tales of cavorting prostitutes and conniving campaign aides on secret sorties with agents of the Kremlin. Ever since, the credibility of these Democratic-funded memos, the so-called Steele dossier, has remained the subject of both official investigation and political sniping. In the 18 months since the dossier's release, government investigations and reports, criminal cases and authoritative news articles have begun to resolve at least some of the questions surrounding the memos. As a whole, the Steele dossier now appears to be a murky mixture of authentic revelations and repurposed history, likely interspersed with snippets of fiction or disinformation. An Associated Press review finds. Mixing fact and fiction? At the vortex of all the arguments is Steele, often described as a button-down, earnest defender of Western interests, who spied on Russia for the British government and later founded a business intelligence firm built on his network of confidential informants. Steele's 17 memos laid out an extraordinarily detailed narrative of how the Russian government supposedly collaborated with the Trump campaign in an elaborate operation to tilt the 2016 presidential race in his favor. Some of the dossier's broad threads have now been independently corroborated. U.S. intelligence agencies and the special counsel's investigation into Russian election interference did eventually find that Kremlin-linked operatives ran an elaborate operation to promote Trump and hurt Democratic opponent Hillary Clinton, as the dossier says in its main narrative. The dossier first told of a clandestine partnership between the Trump campaign and Russian officials in a memo dated June 2016. The month before the FBI began investigating that very possibility. Steele laid out details of a secret Moscow meeting between the Russians and Trump advisor Carter Page months before FBI suspicions about Page and news reports about just such a meeting forced him to leave the campaign. The dossier's portrait of a cooperative campaign also has been bolstered by developments it did not specifically foretell. Legal cases and authoritative reporting have exposed Trump's son Donald Jr. and another aide as receptive to Russian overtures to supply dirt on Clinton. However, the dossier makes other sensational, unverified claims. It reports that Trump provided intelligence to the Kremlin on wealthy Russians in the U.S. The Russian government, in return, was said to supply Trump with secrets about his political rivals while collecting compromising information on him, including recording him with prostitutes who supposedly urinated on a bed in a Moscow hotel. It remains unclear if the Trump campaign, in the end, secretly acquired Russian information, and if so, whether Trump himself was aware and involved. For his part, Trump has dismissed the memos as fake news and turned "no collusion" into the Twitter tagline of his presidency. Russian President Vladimir Putin has denied his government meddled in the election. Defamation claims for wealthy Russians take more specific exception to the dossier. They say they were libeled. In 4 separate lawsuits filed as recently as April, the Russians sued Steele and BuzzFeed, the online news outlet that published the memos in January 2017. 3 of the Russians, all owners of a Moscow-based financial industrial conglomerate called Alpha Group, also have sued Fusion GPS, the research company that enlisted Steele under a contract with a law firm connected to the Democrats. Russian tech entrepreneur Alexei Gubarev and the Alpha Group's owners, Mikhail Friedman, Petr Raven and German Khan, all say they had nothing to do with the events described in the dossier. In cases playing out in state, federal and British courts, they say they took unfair hits to their reputations. The 4 men are named in 2 separate Steele memos, both of which are seemingly out of alignment with the rest of the dossier, as their legal teams have stressed in court filings. Their questionable relevance raises the possibility that they were motivated by someone with a different agenda who perhaps fed false information to the former spy. Indeed, Gabaryev's lawyer has repeatedly suggested his client might have been framed by